The commission report on the Home Rule Charter Committee will now come to order. Mr. Kenneth, will you do the invocation, and Mr. Poche, will you do the pledge?
God our Father, we ask you to bless this commission up here this afternoon, this evening, and we ask that you bless everybody in the audience. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Secretary, would you do the roll call, please?
Here. Michael LeBlanc is absent, and I did receive when you Michael LeBlanc.
Yes, ma'am.
Charles Shivers.
Here.
Milton Stewart Jr.
Here.
Kenneth Leary Sr.
Here.
Mark Stewart.
Here.
Greg DePlessis also sent us an email stating that he would not be here this evening. Robert Poche.
Here.
Diane Ao.
Here.
Ms. Mary Shaw.
Here.
And Sigmund Red Lou.
Here.
Good.
We'd have public comments sign in right now. Ms. Catherine? Yeah, Ms. Catherine.
Yes, I just wanted to briefly make a few comments about public comment. On the parish website today was written this little thing: there are no events on this day. And actually yesterday, I looked for an agenda. I couldn't find one. I did get one this morning from Ms. Suzanne, so I appreciate that. But citizens aren't going to be attending the meeting if they don't know that it exists. So it's really important to post it and give a good notice. I was at your meeting on the last time when you scheduled it for the 20th, and so I inquired about the meeting on the 20th, and I told it was changed till tonight. So if I hadn't known that I called, I would not have known that the meeting was going to be held. These meetings are public, and in accordance with the ordinance that established the commission, they are open, subject to open meeting laws, and require that the agenda be posted at least 24 hours in advance, so that the public has opportunity to review the agenda and come and speak if they'd like to. By ordinance, each agenda item shall identify the member affixing the item to the agenda. This is so that if the public sees the agenda and they notice the name after that item, they can call that person or inquire what exactly that agenda item is about. There are two items on the agenda tonight that do not have a name affixed to them. Item 4, presentations, and item 6, approval of the minutes for August 6th. I think this is something you need to pay attention to. Just make sure that the person's name who's bringing that item forward, that name is placed on the agenda. Secondly, the ordinance also states under commission agenda, and I quote, each item on the agenda shall be limited to proposing, repeal, or amendment of one particular matter in the parish charter. There is no item on the present agenda relating to the repeal or amendment of one particular matter in the charter. I believe item 4, presentations, is outside the scope of the ordinance which you are operating under. If you read that, it says each item on the agenda shall be limited to proposing, repeal, or amendment of one particular matter in the parish charter. So we should be able to look at the agenda and see an item in the charter, a person that put it on, and a discussion of whether we're going to repeal or amend it. Interviews with past and present elected officials are not a part of the scope of the work for these public meetings as described in the ordinance. This does not mean that you are limited to discussing with elected officials past and present outside the meeting. If the ordinance does mean what it says, then I think that the agenda is out of order. And I would ask you to please address that with your legal counselor, okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. We're going to move line item 6 up to number 4, the approval of the minutes of August the 6th. It's now open for discussion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion? Motion. Any objections? Motion passed to accept the minutes of August the 6th, 2008. Now we're going to move to line item 4, presentation. Former Parish President, Mr. Ronnie Hughes. Mr. Hughes?
Good evening, everyone. It's been quite a while other than Sunday, and I've had
Mr. Hughes, can I say something first before you get started so we can set a procedure in which I'd like to do this?
You bet.
I'd like for you to go ahead and address your address to us, and then after the presentation that you put, the commission will then start from my right and ask one question in relation to the charter, and then we'd like your answer, and we'll move forward from my right to my left until we get to my far left. We'll start over again. Is that just okay with you?
Whatever. I'm here
Okay.
at your invitation, so
Yes, sir. I
I
understand.
appreciate the opportunity to come. I haven't paid a lot of attention to politics since January 7th, so it's good to be back in this building. I'd like to, first of all, commend you for accepting the responsibility to do this. Unfortunately, at times today, public service becomes pretty challenging, and many who don't appreciate what you're trying to do. And so as a citizen, I appreciate you for being involved in this process. What I did the 4 years I served as your parish president, I just took notes as we went along and made comments on our charter of things that I thought could be improved, improving opportunities. Now, I think Robert's the only one on the original commission. Am I correct, Robert?
That's
And back in the 70s, myself and a group of citizens, we started meeting over 30 years ago to try to change our form of government. And we even did a petition drive. But because the police jury was not in favor, and they threw out many of the signatures on that petition because the middle initial wasn't crossed properly, or didn't have a period behind the middle initial. The middle name was left out. It wasn't exactly like the voter registration card, and it was mostly, I think, just the political will wasn't there. Many of us way back, and I guess was teaching school then, saw that our parish was changing significantly. And the police jury system was a great system probably for an agricultural, rural community. But when the first plants came in the 50s, and then as I got involved in the community quite a bit as a school teacher and coach, a whole group of us started meeting with a local attorney's office to try to change our form of government. And it was not successful at that time. And as you go back, and Robert will remember this very specifically, and even though I was not on the Charter Commission later, some of those original people were, our charter first failed when presented to the voters. And so there was a lot of give and take in there. And if you go and look at charters from other states, and specifically our state along the Mississippi River, where you have a heavy industrialization growth since the late 50s and early 60s, you see some charters that I think have some really good things that we don't have. And there's some things in ours, and I'm going to, I guess, segment my remarks on the legislative side and the executive side. Now, I've never served in elected office on the legislative side. I served on the executive side. But I did teach civics and government in high school many years ago, and Miss Mary was teaching at that time when I was at Donaldsonville High School. At all levels of government, be it federal, state, or local, the legislative branch has two primary responsibilities. First is to appropriate money to run the government. And secondly is to make and create laws for the benefit of the general welfare of its citizenry. The executive branch, on the other hand, is primarily to administer those laws and to make sure that the money is not wasted, and therefore the executive usually has veto power in both of those areas of the legislative branch. So if the executive or the administrative branch of government, be it federal, state, or local, feels that there is a mistake being made in the creation of a law or the use of the taxpayers' money, that veto power gives he or she the opportunity to try to stop that. And then the legislative branch at all levels has an opportunity to override that veto if they feel strongly that it is in the best interest of the citizenry within that political jurisdiction. Now, since I was invited to come here, I could spend hours with you going through my comments, and I will not do that. I will try to really be very specific, and will address these remarks both from a legislative point of view, trying to put myself there even though I hadn't served there, but I think I understand it, having interacted with them for the past 4 years. And then on the executive side, I think we have improvement opportunities in our charter. First of all, the legislative branch definitely needs to have some 1 or 2 people who work for them. Our charter gives the parish president all the authority to hire and fire people, which is usually the administrative side. But the council needs a council secretary and probably at least an assistant to really handle the matters of the governing authority. Our charter does not give them that opportunity, and they're all part-time. And therefore, it's very critical that they have a couple people who can do some research and things for them to help them be prepared to create laws and to understand the budget process so they can appropriate money properly. And I think a lot of the conflicts of the last 14, 15 years could have been avoided if this one simple thing had been part of our charter process. And those 1 or 2 people should be supervised by the leadership of the council and not the parish president. They need to work for the council so that the council has people to help them do their research and to understand their role in making laws and appropriating money for the benefit of all the citizens. I think another key point on the legislative side, and I think many will, and this is going to be one that's going to be contentious a little bit, because you're asking a member of an elected body to eliminate one of their own positions, but 11 people plus the parish president is 12 elected officials that you got to get to try to agree and come together. That's almost impossible in today's society. You have political activists who have points of view, you have others have points of view. Most citizens only get involved when it's in their backyard, when it affects them or affects their financial situation. The typical citizenry, in my experience, in 61 years now, is kind of passive until it hits close to home. That's why we have a representative form of government. We elect people to represent us. And if they don't do that, well, then we elect someone else at the next election cycle. But you need to set up an opportunity for win-win between the legislative and the executive branches, and that our citizens can have confidence that they are trying to work together as much as they can, still maintain that balance of power to make sure that we do have a check and balance on each other. And of course, the third branch of government, the judicial branch, is there in case laws get by those 2 branches that may be unconstitutional, and they can rule such. So when you stop and think about a local community that's going through a lot of change, and I looked at states around us, our sister states, if you would, Texas, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Mississippi has 5 supervisors per county, regardless if it's Jackson, the capital city, or if it's an area like Biloxi, Gulfport that's grown a lot with the gambling industry, or if it's a community like my farm is located in Pike County, it was very rural. They have 5, and that's it. State of Texas does a similar thing. They limit it to 4. It doesn't matter if it's county that Dallas is located in or Houston is located in. And that's by state statute. Unfortunately, we don't have that in Louisiana. So you see like a St. Tammany, I think, with 14 parish councilmen under the charter form of government. And you see some parishes with as few as 5 and 6. And part of the argument has been made that you have better and more representation the more people you have representing you. And that may have been true back before you had electronic communication and a lot of improvement in transportation methods. You know, it was very difficult for a citizen, say, in Port Vincent, Galveston, just barely in a central parish, to travel to the courthouse in Donaldsonville in 1940. Some families didn't have vehicles before the war. After the war, most families had at least one. But there's a lot of citizens, even today, couldn't go to the courthouse in Donaldsonville, who live in the Prairieville area, who've moved into our parish in the last 10 years. But my point is, you don't need as many people, in my opinion, on the legislative side. It's very, I mean, my 4 years in office, we had 2 or 3 factions within the council. And that's kind of normal in a way, but people are not always going to agree. But when it gets to the point where it creates gridlock and lack of progress in the fastest growing parish in the state, and when I realized in 06, 07, we were number 9 in the nation, something has to be done to get past that. And there is no perfect answer, but by reducing the size of the council, hopefully you'd have a chance to help bring that about. Another perspective that really falls into both the legislative side and the executive side is that currently you only have 1 elected official under the charter approval, you know, discounting your sheriff and your clerk of court and your assessor, who really don't get involved much here. And they don't have boards or councils. You know, the assessor, the sheriff, clerk of court, until they're held accountable by the people every 4 years, they can kind of do what they want to do. What they think is in the best interest, fulfilling their mission within that role of where they fit in local government. And so you need some people, I think, from the council side, and this is a challenge too. It's not easy to make happen, but you have just the parish president looking at the parish as a whole. Of the 12 people now elected, you have 11 single districts and the parish president. When you go to an at-large system, there's pros and cons. And you guys are going to have a challenge to try to figure this out. But at least one of the positive things that I see if you go to an at-large, and if you look at St. John, St. Charles, and some of those parishes that went to the charter form of government with the parish president / council, they have at-large members. Now that can create problems as well. But I think one of the real positives that will come from that is that it will have someone else looking at the parish as a whole, and not just, you know, a politician wants to get reelected, generally speaking, usually. That's one of their first goals. So sometimes their decisions may be made instead of what's in the best interest of the parish or their area, what's in my best interest to get reelected. And that's a natural tendency that people have if they're interested in being reelected and staying in office for a long time. By having at least 2 at-large council positions, you'll now have the parish president and 2 other council people that will have to look at the parish as a whole. And that becomes, now in a non-growth area, that's not as critical probably, because there's not a lot of changing taking place in the parish when things are status quo. And you can go to most of the parishes in Louisiana, they're losing population instead of gaining. They're not growing, they're stagnant. But in a parish like ours, where 10 of the 11 council districts are doing fairly well, and you got one that's really not doing so well as far as economic stability and growth and development. You got high school dropout problems, teenage pregnancy issues, those kind of issues. You need to get 3 or 4 people looking at the whole parish so that you can help lift that area, hopefully, by creating policies and laws that will, as much as you can, from the government side. And government can't solve all these issues, but hopefully can be there to help. So in a parish like ours, where you've got a lot of growth, a lot of development, a lot of change taking place, I think it's absolutely essential that we add some at-large council positions. Now, some people say, well, Ryan, and then you can have people competing with the parish president and all this kind of thing. And that's a valid argument. It's going to cost a lot of money to get elected. I spent $225,000 in 2003 to run for public office for the first time, which is a significant amount of money. Now, parishes along the river outside the Baton Rouge TV area in New Orleans, and of course New Orleans now is probably not as expensive as Baton Rouge since Katrina in 2005. When you've got to appeal to a constituency that's going to watch the 10 o'clock news at night and you're going to pay $1,200 to $1,500 for a 30-second TV commercial, that does get expensive in a hurry. So that is something you have to consider as you look at that large, but a council person should not spend near about that much money, I don't think. But that's going to keep growing because we have a large part of our parish that is a bedroom community of Baton Rouge in a way. And I don't see any way around that, spending money for elections. I think the other thing on the legislative side, without civil service, and civil service would be a problem. It's a problem everywhere. So I think and Robert could tell us better than the rest of us, but we have a part of the process. The charter says that the parish president may remove anyone. Okay, he can terminate any employee of the parish. When that happens, if that person feels like they have not been treated fairly, they can appeal to a personnel review committee, which is a board created of 5 citizens. And then they make a recommendation back to the parish president, supporting the decision. Now, the parish president very seldom does that. It's the department that the person works within. The only time the parish president would get involved is if one of the department heads, one of my key executive secretaries or something. Usually that process of terminating someone would be recommended by the, say it's Public Works, the Public Works director or his or her assistant would recommend that. HR would help file the paperwork to make that happen. And that person can appeal to the Personnel Review Committee, made up of citizens. Now, this would be great if those 5 citizens were all HR people and one that understood federal and state compensation law and labor law. But that's not always the case. You'll find that many times it's difficult to get good people to apply to serve on boards and commissions. But that's what we have now. And then once they make a recommendation to the parish president to support to that decision or not, in most cases, I don't think one time in my 4 years they ever went against the recommendation of that department head or whomever. And most of the time, people didn't even appeal it. But if they did, they had that opportunity and that right. Now, if the Personnel Review Committee recommended the person not be terminated, be retained, and if that person chose to, they could then go to the full council. And if 8 of the 11 council members voted to rehire that person, if you would, and that happened once in my 4 years, I'm not sure in the previous 10, then you can see some of the problems that begin to develop there. Because politics gets involved in that process. If you think people appointed to boards don't have politics, but then you're living in a dream world. If you think there's not politics involved and if black and white issues involved when you're rehiring someone, and a council member happens to be an African American, and this may be an African American child, you and I are close friends, that gets involved in that process, I can tell you. And what then is created within that department is really some problems. And what you have done, you've taken the legislative branch of government and now put them over on the executive side to administer government. That's nothing to do with their role to create laws or to appropriate money. Now, without civil service, how do you protect workers? That's the challenge there. I'm just pointing out some of the problems I saw firsthand in dealing with these kind of issues. And civil service is not, I don't think we should go that route at all. Now, Mark, we started it with the fire district over there because of state fire law. And you may want to address that. Well, we break away from that and do something at our own parish. That's what home rule charter means, to rule yourself. Because when you start down that road, you've got some serious issues that come into play. It's just like sometimes it's very difficult for a school system to get rid of a bad teacher if that person has 3-year tenure, Miss Mary. And we all know many times, the fellow teachers know who cares about the children and who doesn't. But because of the law, and at one time it was necessary because the governor just go fire whoever, the school board superintendent would say, no, I'm going to fire that teacher, even though a great teacher, because of politics or personality. And so these things were created usually at a good cause and for a good reason. But it's this bureaucracy of government grows. It gets very difficult to have good government with those restrictions and those programs. So to limit the size of government and the growth of government and still protect those workers who are good workers and who dearly care about the parish and do a good job day in and day out gets to be a challenge. Without some type of an appeal process, because it could be a parish president just comes in and doesn't like somebody and terminates someone, which is not fair to that person or to the parish because they're a great employee. So it's a challenge that you need to really seriously look at. But when you get the legislative branch in government involved, other than ratifying key department heads, you get into problems. Plus, they get themselves in trouble then, because they're operating outside their scope as a member of the legislative body. And it puts them in a bad position, really, and they're asked to reinstate someone that has been terminated in the parish. So I think you need to look at that section, legislative authority. You have another point that in our chart that's really bad in my opinion. You know, we are government of the people and by the people. And regardless of sometimes if we like or don't like someone, that is what the American dream and what our founding fathers created here. Was a government of the people. I don't think they ever envisioned, for example, members of Congress making careers out of government service, you know, on the elected side. And that's become a real problem. When you have career politicians, the needs and the expectations of the citizens, I think it really hurt many times. But yet, on the other hand, if you just have career bureaucrats, well, then they run everything, and they've got more authority than the elected officials do, which is an argument against term limits sometimes. A guy serving 35 years in the transportation department has more influence many times than the governor does because they know where all the skeletons are in that department, and they know how to get it done. So you got some real challenges there when you don't have complete integrity and 100% in the lives of everyone involved in that process. But whenever you require for a petition, you know, to appeal, like if the parish council doesn't go along with your recommendations, say you submit that in April, and they won't let the people vote on things that you agree need to be considered by the people, like we did in the 70s, the only recourse we have is to start a petition drive. And our charter requires 1/3 of registered voters do that. Since I've done that before, I understand what it was like just when there was 20,000 registered voters. We got over 60,000 today. And to get every one of those signatures exactly matched up with the way things are in Robert's office as registered voters That's over 20,000 signatures, so you think of the time, the manpower, the expense of volunteers to go out and do that. I think that's onerous and really un-American. And the form of government is by the people and for the people. That needs to be reduced to 10 or 15%, the petition process, so that the people can truly, when they feel like their elected representatives are not allowing them to make necessary changes or additions of whatever the process, whatever it is that needs to be done. That's just too tough of a burden, especially in our society today with people's lifestyles. No matter how committed they are to being a good citizen, it's very difficult to get 20-something thousand registered voters in Ascension Parish and get the people together to cause it to happen and to make sure that each one of those signatures are valid, quote unquote, meets the bureaucracy and the rules. So I think you need to look at that seriously, and I think that's Section 9. Now there's a lot of other little comments that I've made on a lot of things. If we could get 5 council members at large, it'd be great. Get the Justice Department to approve that, maybe a challenge. My personal opinion, if we didn't have any incorporations, which will create a stir, but things need to be discussed and debated. St. John, St. Charles, they have no incorporations. All the taxes go to the parish council and parish president. St. Bernard's the same way, I believe. So it's used where it's needed. If we don't seriously address issues like transportation and sewerage, these issues in our own parish, and it's going to cost a lot of money. That's what I learned in 4 years. And unless you have more faith than I do in getting our money back from the federal and state government, because we're sending too much of it to Washington and Baton Rouge. That's just the plain, honest truth. They're getting way too much of the resources of the American people. And it leaves very little, especially when you have, like in our parish, for the city of Gonzales, which I dearly love, and finished high school at Gonzales High School. 80% of their revenue are from people living outside the city. But those 20% are receiving the benefits of those revenues. That money is spent within those corporate limits. And the same would apply to Donaldsonville and Sorrento. Whereas a parish like St. John, St. Charles, and other ones, that money is used throughout the parish, regardless of whether the income is generated or whether tax. And this is sales tax now. And I don't know if that falls within your scope, but it certainly needs to be discussed, because the first step to change is discussion and talking about things that are tough to talk about at times. But now, it'd be a huge mistake to incorporate other parts of our parish, in my opinion. But the charter needs to address it. No other reason other than you see what Central's going through. But at times you understand why people want to improve their lives and improve their services. Because parish government is not providing the services that citizens need to have in 2008 when you have all the growth and development that we have. And the money is over $1 billion to address those needs. Okay, it's just that simple. John, you need to understand that as you serve in this role. It's over probably $1.5 billion to address transportation, sewer, and other needs, without counting education and law enforcement, which you're into with this charter. And so that's a lot of money for a local community to come up with of 110, 115,000, whatever the latest number shows. Okay. So, now, what questions do you have?
Okay, Ms. Terry, would you start? And I want to remind everybody to take their own notes and write it for when we come back and start addressing each article and section in the charter, that you'll have your notes. So each and every one of the commissioners, take your own notes. Ms. Terry?
Thank you. I had 7 prepared questions for you. Most of those you've already answered. So I will be asking a question that we have not had any touch on. Do you believe that our parish ethics guidelines are sufficient? Or do they need to be strengthened? And if so, how?
Now, if you look in the charter, Terry, and this is the only place that really I used to keep on my desk the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, the charter. Because if the charter doesn't address it, we come under the Larson Act, as the lawyers told me, or state law, which I think we need to address more and more locally. If you're looking on section 802, prohibitions and conflicts of interest, page C27 in my copy, but as a result of his position, no elected officer, appointed official, or employee of the parish shall directly or indirectly solicit or receive any privilege, rebate, reduced rate, or any other thing of value from any person, firm, or corporation doing business with the parish. Taken literally, I probably could have never went to lunch with an engineer or a person with the fire service. If I asked the attorneys about this on first, you'll see I highlighted with a note back in January of 2004. And my question was, what does this mean exactly? Because if it says what it means what it says, people, you, for example, appointed to a board, couldn't receive anything of value. How do you define that? A person doing business with the parish. The lawyers told me that it hadn't been interpreted that strictly. Now, when you compare this with the new state ethics laws, and I understand you need a Philadelphia attorney to really understand some of that, this is really pretty straightforward. But it also hamstrings you in a way. Because in state ethics law, you could go out to lunch with someone that was doing business with the parish or trying to do business with the parish. And let's face it, the parish needs some people to do business with it. So if you hire all the people you need to do it all yourself, you're going to have 1,000 people working here. See, and so you need some contracts and you need some consultants and things you can count on to try to help reduce costs. And so you need to look at that section there. If you're going to keep it in, well, then you got to start telling Miss Lindsay, I understand it's going to practice law now, so the parish is going to have to interpret that, but it's pretty straightforward. I couldn't get anything. I couldn't go to lunch with anybody because that's a person, a firm, or corporation. I'm not sure who that leaves out doing business with the parish. So the auditors who audit the books, and they say, let's go have lunch, we're going to begin the audit process, the parish would pay for that instead of those consultants, if this is interpreted as I understand it, literally, Parish. Now, this is the only part of the charter that I'm familiar with that addresses that, ethics. And I'm not aware of any laws that the council has passed, although there's hundreds and thousands of them out there since the 1800s, the police jury laws and all. Obviously, you don't know all of that when you're serving in office, but I'm not familiar with any other ordinance that specifically addresses ethics that the council or the police jury had ever passed. Now, the state has a bunch, but it's they're in the process of being revised. And some of the things that were crazy about that, Terry, I'll just give you a quick example. Technically, it was against the law. Let's say that Milton did business with the parish. His parish is of old family business, but she's not a part of it anymore, did it one time. If that air conditioning company would have dropped the turkey off for Christmas, say, we thank you for the business that we do at the parish, that was against the state law. It is. That was. I'm not sure. But if they took me to lunch to Ralph and Calcoon and spent $1,000, that was okay. But if they didn't eat that turkey with me when they dropped it off, that was against the law. Because it had a special food privilege. That's how crazy it gets at times. And most of us want good law and good ethics. But if they dropped off a bottle of wine, which I don't drink alcohol at all, but if they dropped it off, if they drank it with me, or I drank it with them, it was illegal. If they just dropped it off at the parish president's office, technically it was illegal. Some of the attorneys didn't know that. Because I served on the hospital board, the parish attorney was the one that dropped off fruit baskets to us every Christmas. That was against the law. And let's say, so I used to open it up and make them eat something in it to try to be in the letter of the law. So it gets a little crazy sometimes. Or we'd send it to the nursing home and give it away. But that's part of the problem there with those things. You could spend $1,000 to take a person to lunch. They could say, you're in that position now. on this charter commission. There's some group out there that that's going to benefit from changes to the charter. They say, okay, Milton or Robert or Terry will take you to lunch on the half shell. It'd be hard to spend $1,000 a half shell, but spend all afternoon and spend that money there. That's okay, according to state law. Now, it probably violates the spirit of this charter. But if they just dropped off that $1,000 worth of food or $10 ham at your house, that would be against the law. So those are some of the issues that gets kind of crazy at times and really hard to keep up with, that don't seem to make a lot of common sense. But they're trying to prevent things. But just like you could donate $5,000 to a parish president campaign, but you could only donate $100 cash. Well, the $5,000 check is no more money, than $5,000 cash. But trying to, I guess, track it and keep it all above board. But those are some of the issues you get into. Now, the other part of the charge just says that you can't serve. Like I couldn't go to work as parish president, for example, for 1 year. The charter says. The state says 2 years. In other words, let's say that the parish wanted to hire me to cut the grass. They couldn't do that until a year according to our charter. State law, I think, is 2 years. You couldn't go to work.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin?
Ronnie, in Section 304 of the Charter, I wanted to ask you, my question was, do you see any problems with the veto process that's in our Charter currently?
The veto section was actually one area the parish president had a good bit of authority. It needs to be, I think, cleaned up a little bit in the wording, just so the process is understood better. Something that came up a couple times by the charter, if I veto, and I think I only had 4 vetoes in 4 years, in my example. Use me for an example, since I know about me. If I waited to the 10th day to issue the veto, there would always be a parish council meeting scheduled within that window. Okay, so the charter says that session or that meeting that could only address that issue, that agenda item, to override the veto would be part of the regular meeting. They just really would try to put it in there as okay, this part of the meeting now, guys, is going to be dedicated to the veto. So now, if you did it outside of the 10-day window before the next governing authority meeting, but then you'd call a special meeting, just for the purpose of overriding that veto, giving them the chance to do it. And I think we did it a couple ways, my 4 years. So now, the parish president can, according to this section, mark and veto anything pretty much other than an ordinance or code or resolution, for like auditing, investigating the parish president, or auditing the books, or proposed amendments to the home rule charter, or to alter the governing authority procedure, which pretty much makes sense. Although, if the charter will address and keep separate those 2 roles, legislative, executive, it would do away with a lot of needed that statement about governing authority procedure, because they should set their own procedures, which they do. They did. First time I think I'm aware of, they actually did a written set of procedures in February of 2004, and we worked with them on that, so that we try to separate that. Kind of fell apart sometimes over the 4 years, but at least it was done, put it in writing. Did you have a specific concern in there?
No, I just wanted to see if there had been anything from your beliefs as serving as parish president here, if you saw any issues with the way it was currently set up.
I think that area is pretty good, at least in my experience. And it's very difficult with 11 for the council to get 8 to override. It didn't happen when I was parish president. I'm not sure if it happened with President Martinez or initially President Marchand before, but it is pretty difficult. You can usually keep 4 on your side, which gets to be a problem sometimes. But I mean, that's just the that's that balance of power, negotiate and try and reach a win-win in the process, which is what, you know, the art of negotiation is about. It's difficult at times, but, and, okay.
Mr. Kenner?
To answer your question, Mark, I mean,
Nothing at this time, thank you.
The question I had was in reference to the president's power when it comes to terminating employees. And there's a paragraph, I think it's under section 303, under F. After termination, they say, however, the governing authority shall have the power to reinstate employee. I think you made mention of that fact earlier. I wonder, the question is, do you know of any other charters? I know you probably researched a lot of charters in the general area that has this statement in it. That
I don't recall it, but I'm sure it's probably there, Charles, unless they have, unless you have civil service, the issue becomes how do you protect the right of the employees, okay? You know, Huey Long, you know, according to legend, used to collect money. You wanted to work for the state, he had a little box and you donated. Obviously, that's an abuse of power. So how do you prevent that? Well, civil service was created at the state level to try to prevent that. But then it grows to a point where you get a bureaucracy of its own, where the people lose very little control over that bureaucracy, the people being the government by the people and for the people. Because now they have legal protection from abuse, but then the people start to get abused at times, I see. So how do you know, it's difficult to get the pendulum in the middle. It seems to swing too far this way or too far this way. How do you get it right without growing government too much and giving elected officials too much authority and yet not turning it all over to the bureaucrats? And I don't say that disrespectfully. There's wonderful people who work in government who care about their country and they're really trying to do a great job. But the bureaucracy of that process after years continues to grow and becomes deeper and deeper, and it takes on a power of its own. And you all, I think all of you know what I'm talking about. And so, yet I don't think you should have the legislative branch reinstating employees, because it's really outside of their scope. Now, another part that relates to the same concern, I think, if I understand you correctly, Charles, it says under the powers in Section 4 where the powers of the legislative branch are outlined. You know, it talks about them, they shall not supervise or direct an employee.
Yeah.
Let's see. Section 422, restrictions. Members of the governing authority shall not direct or supervise parish employees or parish officers who are subject to the direction and supervision of the president except through the office of the president. Now read that and really think about it. And the question I wrote down back in 2004 was, who isn't? Which parish employee isn't subject to the direction and supervision of the president? Now, it may very well be that Mark Stewart may not be now, but it's probably not, because our fire boards are really advisory boards and not authority boards. And Terry's on one of those boards. Mark's the fire chief. Now, he's on the state civil service now. Can the parish president fire him? That's an interesting question. Civil service say no. Charter probably says yes. And so you get into spending the people's money on legal things. Huh? Yeah, drainage, and that was not addressed. That issue, it became a huge issue, and so you understand what I did, why I did. I didn't get into drainage too much till the third year. You know, really got into it and learned it, and met Mr. Follett, got him to come back so we could talk to him and get his perspective on all this. I got perspective from the chairman and the vice chairman way back, and they'd all quit. Okay, the ones that was on the drain. They resigned, got out of it, left it all to the police jury and then the council. What I learned from Mr. Follett personally, that we had spent we had received about $105 million in revenue for a $35 million drainage plan. That was just the sales tax side of revenue, not the bond. I mean, not the ad valorem taxes. And I wanted to make sure I understood what the people voted on in '84. There were so many issues in his drainage plan were not currently being practiced. But we already generate 3 times the money we needed for that drainage plan to be constructed. And he specifically said, and I use this as an example, and glad that Robert brought it up, because this is where our tax money is really, that may be the only area where we got adequate funding for parish services. And it's not always adequate, but it's closer than the rest. So for a $35 to $37 million drainage plan, this was just East Ascension now. We had raised $105 million and a half-cent sales tax at that time. And he put in his plan that the sales tax would go away when the construction was finished about 1990, and we live off of the millage to maintain that system. Now, obviously, some things have changed, growth and all. But the sunset clause was not even in the ballot that the people voted on. It made it a perpetual tax. You're talking about this. So it's there forever until the police bureau or the parish council now or somebody lets the people vote on that again. And so you talk about an issue that needs to be addressed seriously. Yes, sir.
Mr. Hughes, I was making reference to the point that you indicated that the parish president is in charge of all the personnel, and I pointed out, I was making the point that that's not necessarily the case in the East Ascension Major Drainage.
It's not now. And I let them fire me. I wanted to be fired. Because sometimes things have to fall apart to put it back together right with drainage. And the parish attorney told me when I didn't even know when I applied for the job of parish president that the parish president wasn't over all aspects of parish government. People thought you were, and they hold you accountable because they think you can solve their problem. And they don't want to hear, no, that's the Drainage Commission, which is a separate political entity created by the state legislature. They think you there, and that's why we put in a parish president, was their typical remark, to solve these problems. So I appreciate that, Robert, but it got to be, so it needs to be put back together, and it needs to be addressed. That half-cent drainage tax definitely needs to be addressed, because that money could be used for sewer and road, and I think people would vote to redirect some of that if they understand and are educated on what's happened since '84 when we passed that. I think it was '84 we passed that tax. It's been 8 months. I haven't paid attention to this stuff, but I knew it backwards and forwards then.
Mr. Hughes, you're saying that the drainage board or the drainage operation of the Ascension Parish should be back under the guidance and rulings and outlines, whatever you want to call it, of the parish president?
You get into politics now, which you can't. One thing that a council member taught me: you can't take politics out of politics. I really tried to come in and run the parish the way I ran my business. So we tried to go to 80-20 rule: 80% business, 20% politics. Drainage, and getting into Attorney General opinions that I got, I gave them the error in them. Attorney General said that the parish council could abolish the drainage district. If you look in the charter, they have the power to create, alter, and abolish all districts. But that district, East Ascension Drainage and West Ascension Drainage, were created by a special legislative act. And I think Representative Diaz and Representative Russo from Donaldsonville were the two that introduced that in about 1983 or so, if I remember. So they created the East Ascension Drainage District to be made up of the 8 police jurors living on the East Bank or representing the East Bank. West Ascension Drainage at that time had 3 living on West Ascension side. And it wasn't supposed to cross because West Ascension didn't have the sales tax. They only had the property taxes for drainage. East Ascension had the half-cent sales tax dedicated to drainage, and you always had arguments between major and minor definitions of what's major drainage, what's minor drainage. If your house is flooding, you don't think that way. Just like if you're in a bad accident on a highway, you don't think of that. Is that a federal road, a state road, or a local road? You just know the road needs to be a good highway. And so the citizens are really, because most of them have moved in since that drainage tax was passed. They didn't even vote on it. They don't have a clue what was done. That's why we tried to find Mr. Follett. He was in North Carolina to see what was his perspective, what was he paid to do, and what did he understand was supposed to have been done back in 1984. Mr. Mitch Epps found it. And Mr. Mitch has been vice chairman of drainage, and Willie Clinton might have been chairman, I think, of the Drainage Commission originally.
Mr. Hughes.
So yes, it needs to be abolished. You need that. And I asked the state legislature to abolish those special districts. You thought they I asked to attack Nikita Khrushchev back in the 50s.
Well,
because of the politics there. So to make it simple and clean, get the legislature to abolish the districts and let the parish council and parish president deal with drainage. And let the people go vote on if they want to keep a half cent dedicated to drainage, or they want to use some of that for water or sewer or roads or whatever. And if you don't, the people need to decide that. Okay. And the way it's set up now, when they were told that the parish president couldn't veto what they wanted to do, they just get 6 votes. But now you got 10 live on the East Bank and only 1 lives on the West Bank. Okay, but 2 of the 10 represent part of the West Bank. So you still got 3 sitting on West Ascension Drain. They used to meet twice a month when I took off, and we died down to 1. They met at 6:30 in the morning at the Holiday Inn or something over breakfast. The West Ascension Drainage Committee. They don't make much money, but they make a little money going to meet. And you got 10 on the East Ascension Drainage now. Well, you just did away with the charter and the section on the balance of power between the 2 branches, separation of power, because they get their 6 votes, well, yeah, 6 out of 10, majority, and go do what they want to. And it's not all their fault, not all the fault of the parish president. It's a system that is doomed for failure. It's not a win-win at all, because the people are the ones that are not being given the product they should be given. And we spent, I bet you now, if you go look, that's over $120 million generated by that tax, if you count the investment income off of the money. For a $35, $37 million drainage plan that was supposed to go away when it was finished. If you go look at the ballot in '84, and it was not, the sunset clause was not put in, which is what politicians do. That's horrible. But you people don't have a right to vote on that again. Say, okay, you're doing a good job with our money. We're going to renew that tax if you need it, because of the development that's taking place in the parish.
Red, I apologize for skipping you.
Ronnie, in your day-to-day operation of the parish, what one particular duty of the executive branch would you change if you had a chance to do that? And I'm going to give you time to think about it a little bit, but
Let me think. One
day-to-day operation, whether it's deleting or adding to, what one change would you make to the duties of the executive branch?
Let me think about that. I hadn't thought about that. Mr. Cloyd, you got a question for me? You don't have?
No, I'm gonna pass it to Mr. Robert.
Excuse, my question to you would be, you had indicated earlier that you thought that the council needed a secretary and probably an assistant secretary. Do you envision that those 2 people being under the supervision of the parish president, or answerable only to the council?
Answering to the council, Robert, because I'll tell you why. They need to have someone that they feel like, and that it kind of crosses a little bit. I know it sounds, it's tough, but I'm speaking now from 4 years. I'm at the civics class textbook now, 4 years of on-the-job work. And plus, the parish our charter says the parish secretary treasurer can be one position, one person. Sometimes it's been divided. Suzanne was the parish secretary, Gwen was the treasurer. We need to get way past that. You need a chief financial officer. Our charter doesn't even address having a public works department. Do you know that? Public works is not listed as a department. Planning and development is not listed as a department. Now, I got the council in February of '04 to pass an ordinance creating those 2 departments, because we could never find, since that '94 charter went into effect, they had ever been created. And only council can create them once the charter was passed. In our day and age, with all that's happening in our parish, you need a full-blown planning and development department to work with developers and citizens. So unless you want our parish, and don't take this wrong, Mr. Leary, I don't know where you came from. I don't know you. I think the rest I know. And I'm not trying to insult people in Kenner or Metairie, but I don't want Ascension Parish to look like Kenner. Okay, just kind of spread out away, or Metairie, But we've gotten there, and we're going to keep going that way, because our charter only says the governing authority will create a plan for unincorporated land. And the lawyers have interpreted that to say, well, we're under the Larson Act, we're under the state act, since we didn't put it in our charter, what we want that to be. So you get caught up now between what the state laws say about development and what your local planning and zoning commission and parish president's office of planning says about development. You need to put that in the charter, Robert. Now, specifically your question, my experience was, and I spent a lot of time with other entities from our state and others, just to say, how do you do it, looking for best practices. And I thought St. Charles did something that was kind of neat. Their charter allows the council to hire their own secretary. Then the parish president supplied 7 or 8 other people to work with the councilman to help them prepare for meetings and so forth. And that's a lot of people. That's too many probably. Okay, but they still report to the parish president, other than the council secretary. That council secretary was hired by the council and can only be fired by the council. And so, but the council, you need a council secretary. You're going to find, and this became an area of problems between us at times, because my concern as the CEO of the parish was also the welfare of those people I work with. So you had parish employees in the past council, and I don't know what the current, they created all kind of committees and committee meetings at night. And so you had parish, the Secretary of Public Works may only been making $30,000 to $32,000 a year, or whatever it was, and I don't remember. They may have 3 young children at home. And so they're going to go to a transportation committee meeting, a drainage bridge committee meeting, all these weeknights, and they should be at home with their families. You know, I still believe that family is more important than government. And so if you had a couple that worked for the council, and they understood that, but I applied for the job of the Parish of Ascension Governing Authority, and I understand that part of my job description is to be at these meetings at night. That's going to affect my application, and I understand that going in. We've got people now working for me, and it almost get like they're being supervised in violation of charter, because they're going to be at all these meetings at night. And so a councilman called them up and said, look, I need you to do an agenda for this meeting tonight. Technically, they don't have that authority, even with the charter now. But it got to be a real problem, both from the separation of the 2 levels of branches of government, but for those the personal lives of my associates, because of their responsibilities at home and other things. And so I think the council has to, and one person is probably not enough with the different committee meetings they have, unless you're going to pay that person an awful lot of money, because you see just what you're doing, and you multiply that by every board and commission needed a secretary there. And I tried to get some boards of bylaws. Part of that reasoning was just so my employees would not have to go to another meeting at night and be there and taking minutes and all those kinds of things. Try to get that board, if they really need to be a board, they put to appoint within their own commission their own secretary to take their minutes and all, which is perfectly easy to do. But so it's a problem, Robert. So I think it needs to happen, and at least one should be the council secretary, as distinguished from the charter. The parish secretary should be the executive assistant to the parish president, and the official, the official depository of the executive branch records, and whoever the council secretary is should take care of all the council official documents and all. And I think Red has served in that. Suzanne's been there a long time. They could tell you in private maybe how they feel about it, but from my position as parish president, trying to put myself in their position on the legislative side, they really need some people to help them, because they should be part-time positions, and they are. If we go to full-time, like Jefferson Parish almost, where we pay $65,000, $70,000 a year for a person to serve on a council, and then I think you've lost part-time public servants that our founding fathers envisioned.
Excuse me. Well, I guess I was trying to
Please call me Ronnie, Robert.
Ronnie, if you will. I was trying to determine if that was
from what you had said prior to that, if these two employees would be exception to being governed by being under the parish president's.
I think they should be.
It's just those two employees.
Keep the politics out, yes.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Right, so that way the council chairman and vice chairman, whoever they designate, would be responsible. If they want HR to help interview and process all that, you need to do that, but I think they need to work for the council.
I just want to clarify. Thank you.
And if I was on the council, I know I would need that. If I had a full-time job and doing this part-time, I'd need someone to help me prepare for meetings and who could be there. Ms. Mary.
I need a clarification. You indicated a problem with career politicians. Are you hinting that term limits might be a way around that?
That's a two-edged sword. I used to believe strongly in term limits. But after meeting with a lot of people in Washington and in Baton Rouge the last 4 years, what happens when you term limit your elected official, who is your representative, then more and more the authority of government is being turned over to people with federal or civil service protection who are there for 30 and 40 years. And in reality, they know more about the ins and outs of it because they do that every day. You know, they know where to go find some money to send to Montana for a road project because they know it's there, whereas they're not going to send it to us to fix Highway 42, for example. But they've been there for 35, 40 years, and they know money has been appropriated 20 years ago, never been spent. So they know a way to kind of get that around and get it to that congressman, for example, in Montana. I learned this stuff dealing with it. And so what happens with term limits, you're giving more authority to those people. So that's why it becomes a two-edged sword. Now, the people should be the term limits when we vote. But unfortunately, most citizens don't really pay enough attention to what's really going on. And so I would think because of the lack of attention of the electorate, term limits is probably a necessary evil today. And I'll say it that way. Now, on the other hand, to prevent what's happened at the federal level and to some extent at the state level with those people who work in all these agencies who are there for a long term, they have a lot of authority and power. And I'm personally aware where they just stop something from happening even though Congress appropriated the money because they know how to bog down the process because they've been there so long. And so it's really a tough deal now. You know, if you go to political science class, they'll tell you don't do it for that reason because then you're putting all the employees of government more in power. But so I don't know. It's a tough one. But I would probably say in our parish today, I would probably put it in. Some of the neighboring parishes have it, some don't. I can't tell you why it wasn't put in ours. Robert may know. I'm sure it was discussed and debated a lot, and it needs to be debated. It's not just an easy answer to it because just some of the things I mentioned. We could talk about that for hours, just that one concept, the and cons of it, from all of our perspectives. But
I'll pass, thank you. Ronnie, I'm going to come back to me just a minute before I turn it back to Ms. Terry. On your department heads, like your financial officer, your officer, chief administrator, et cetera, do you feel like that these particular offices should have degrees in their respective field? In other words, if you have accounting, you have a certified CPA, or if you have public works as a civil engineer, how do you feel about that as a former parish president for the people of Ascension Parish? Not necessarily meaning the people that are in office right now, but upcoming people that would be taking the place of those people that would be retiring, resigning, or moving on.
I don't think I'd put it in the charter.
Okay.
But I would have it, and we started doing that. We hired at the second, for example, if I would have just said we're going to do that across the board, a person that's been working in parish finance for 30-plus years without a degree in finance would be eliminated.
Well, I'm not...
As you probably know now. On the other hand, we hired, for the first time I'm aware, we hired a CPA to be her backup, you know, to really start getting... We don't need just treasury work anymore. That's budget.
Right.
What we need is someone to do long-range forecasting, multi-year budgets, and needs of the parish based on what's been happening in the parish. She needs someone that has the ability from economics, financial planning, to say, okay, for the next 5 years, Ascension Parish needs X number of dollars for this, this, and this. And that's the role of a chief financial officer in a company. That's why our charter needs to address that.
I mean,
and
I'm
I
not-
would require that. You know, chief
I'm not
financial
necessarily
officer
meaning the
definitely have
people-
a degree in
I'm not
finance.
necessarily meaning the people that are in place right now. I'm talking about in the charter for any future people that would take the place of the people that are in office right now.
That's tough too, Milton. I'll give you an example. If you knew the gentleman who was over Public Works in East Baton Rouge Parish for a number of years, he retired.
Yes, sir,
He
did.
went to work for the sheriff's office. He did not have a degree in engineering. But a lot of people say he was a great public works director. Now, maybe he's just a great PR guy on television in the morning on the news. You know, 'cause I'm not personally familiar with his work, but it seems like he knew what he was doing, but he wasn't a degreed engineer, for example, in public works. Now, what you do need, and that's what we started doing, we hired 2 or 3 young engineers, because we needed young talent. That's why I hired Lindsay when I got her resume just on the internet one day from her. She's working for the parish president, St. Tammany Parish, on Lindsay. Kevin Davis, living in Dutchtown. And so, if I had stayed in the election and won the election again, I would probably resign the next day if we didn't create our own parish attorney's office. And I didn't get to that yet, but I need to, because it's that critically important. And I think Mr. Martinez and Mr. Marchand would tell you the same thing. And it's not trying to grow government. When I met with the public works director who took the gentleman's place that we referenced earlier, he said, Ronnie, well, he called me, well, I guess he called me Ronnie, some call you Mr. President. So I got 4 attorneys just works for public works in East Baton Rouge Parish to keep up with all these violations and codes and ordinances and people doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing, who just sends out the letters. You know, if you don't remove this fence, it's in this drainage right away, or it's this, 10 days, we're going to take it down. All of those issues, when I took office in 2004, Milton, parish attorney told me, Ronnie, we don't even own most of the right-of-way along roads. I said, what? No, we don't. We just have got, police juries used to carry a form in their pocket. Say, sign here and we're going to do this through your property. A lot of that was never even recorded. So, like, I signed away most of the money before I left on the road project. All that was in the fund. You go out and look at Severio Road and these Boudreaux and Worthy. We paid a lot of money of our local citizens' money to pay utilities to move their utility line because we couldn't prove that that was a public parish right-of-way, that the utilities had more right in there because they put the phone lines down in whatever year, or the gas company ran this line. So we were paying for this stuff, Milton.
I'm getting a note from Mr. Porsche saying that we're kind of getting off of the question that I'm going to caution you. I realize you're answering the best you can.
Give me the question again.
Okay, the question would be, is that in the future, not meaning...
No, I would say no.
Okay. Ms. Terry?
I would put it in HR departmental policies for second in command that those would be requirements, but not in the charter.
All right. Ms. Terry?
Keep in mind the difference between the Constitution and procedures.
Okay.
The charter is the Constitution. Right. Personnel manual, administrative manuals are procedures.
Well, the reason I asked the question is because I reviewed about 4 different charters of neighboring parishes, and each one of them, I'm reluctant to say, but I think it was only one of them, but out of the 4, 3 had that requirement for their department heads.
It probably took some of the politics out of it, because you keep them hiring a good old bar to be over a department because you're a good friend that really not qualified. But today, if you can get people to come to work for parish government at the salary we pay, and those who are really highly credentialed, to say it that way,
okay,
you're fortunate, to get them to come. And so that's a key ingredient.
Ms. Terry?
One real quick question, Ronnie. Livingston Parish, St. Tammany, Iberville, and St. Bernard all have a similar section. I'll reference section 6.04. It's an emergency ordinance. In our charter, it is not required that a statement of reason for the emergency be made. In Livingston, St. Tammany, Iberville, and St. Bernard, it is. Do you believe that in the event of an emergency and an ordinance being passed that requires the declaration of an emergency, should it contain clear, concise statement of the reason for the emergency?
This didn't come up now, and I'm not sure if this is this section. I don't have any notes on it. If it was talking about when the parish president declares an emergency, it's really talking about the governing authority primarily. But the parish president is the one who declares a state of emergency due to a natural disaster or terrorism attack or whatever the case may be. I think this is talking more of a fiscal emergency.
6.04 actually says...
I think this is referring to the budget finances primarily, and there may be a little conflict here. If you go to I think it's Section 8 of the parish ordinances, which is the emergency, where it outlines the authority of the parish president declaring an emergency, appointing a director, and so forth. You might want to kind of clean that up some with this. I think this is primarily trying to address, and maybe Robert knows, because it doesn't say anything about the parish president declaring an emergency, but if you go to the ordinances, Section 8 of the ordinances, that's where it says that where the parish president can actually commandeer local businesses and all to meet the, to protect life, health, and property, public safety.
But you would want a specific statement of what that emergency is.
Yeah, now here it says an emergency ordinance shall be published in full in the official journal, the last sentence of this section you referenced, 604, within 10 days after adoption, which is similar to the other language when they adopt an ordinance. But I think this is saying, let's just say the bank calls up and say, Mr. Hughes, I was still parish president, you guys need $150,000 to cover checks. Your parish is overdrawn. I think that's what this is trying to get to, and some parishes have that problem. Believe me, most of them, a lot of them in our state have serious fiscal problems. Is to address that, what I call the parish chairman and vice chairman, they, I guess, I don't know if it says that, I guess they're required to pass an ordinance, which really in that instance is probably too burdensome if the parish got in that condition. They shouldn't get there for doing the right things, but the bank called and said, you got to cover this overdraft quickly. Time you call a meeting and pass the ordinance and publish it, it may be a little ineffective in that case. But it's trying to make sure that the government authorities are not doing anything outside the eye of the public and the citizens. But there are legitimate cases where it's just impossible almost. If you was in the, just think of New Orleans and Katrina. When that thing happened, when it happened in the middle of the night, you got to make some quick decisions, and you don't have time to call the council together and to pass, emergency ordinances. So I think if you go back to some other comments in here on the ordinances, you'll see that the intent is to make sure the public is kept informed and they have a right. But our system of government is based on trust. That's why we elect people to represent us. Excuse me. And so we have to trust them in a state of emergency that they're going to be doing the right thing. Yeah. And we have to be worthy of that trust. And but I didn't see a problem with that, and we had obviously a major one indirectly with Katrina in our parish, and we had to do some things quickly. And we didn't have time to call a meeting of the council in the middle of the night when we had people pouring in here, being dropped off in buses and and Tangle Mall and all type of thing. We had to make some quick decisions and do some things. So I think generally speaking, it's trying to address the fiscal side here. I may be wrong, but I'd have to go back and reference the part in Section 8 of the ordinances that talk about emergency powers. I think that's mostly dealing with disasters and things, not fiscal disasters. Money problems.
6.04 seems to be dealing with emergencies affecting life, health, property, or public safety.
Well, if that's the case, it needs to be cleaned up some, because the parish president certainly has authority under Section 8 to declare emergency. The parish council doesn't declare emergencies. Only the parish president can by state law. And so where they have a parish president. If you don't have a parish president, if you got a police jury, or if you got a city parish, police jury president or chairman, whatever they call it in their parish, would be the one to declare it and work with the emergency director of that parish. But
Thank you.
Mr. Mark?
I don't have anything at this time.
I'd make a note there, Suzanne, you the secretary, to look at section, ordinance, I think it's 8, isn't it? Emergencies and with this section here. I think that will address you, Terry, and it probably needs to, if it means what you think it means, it needs to be clarified and cleaned up a little bit for sure. Because, and I think it's just talking about an ordinance here. You can have resolutions and you can take action without a resolution. The parish president has to do that all the time. If not, you would handcuff the executive branch, in a true something that just happens like that, to take quick action as necessary for the life and health and property of our citizens. But this section, if it means what you think, it needs to be reconciled with the ordinances in 8, and the council would have to make adjustments to those ordinances if necessary. Yes, sir.
Mr. Kennan?
Nothing, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Red? Mr. Porsche? That's right. Mr. Ronnie, I want to thank you for coming before this commission and giving us an enlightening on the pros and cons of the different issues that was asked here tonight. And I want to ask you one more favor. Would you take and the items that you talked about that you feel like really needs to be addressed, would you furnish this commission just a little short list of those items that you did in case we overlook one of them? It doesn't necessarily have to be in depth, just the article and section numbers. They may be in a minute.
A note from my secretary, which is me.
Right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right. Yes, sir. Please. I just want to cover every base. They should be in the minutes, and we should have them all here. We enough of us here taking notes and our own notes and everything. But I just want to reassure that we tidy up our record so that when we do go,
being here with you.
It's been a pleasure having you here, Mr. Hughes. Thank you very much, sir. Our next guest will be Mr. Jerry Sawwell. Mr. Jerry, would you please come forward? And I want to, first of all, thank you on behalf of this commission to come before us and enlighten us on the Home Rule Charter based from your perspective as a councilman and chairman of the council. We will take the same format. I would like for you to make a small presentation if you want. I have. And then we'll do a question and answer session, and each council or each commission member will take their own notes and everything. And again, I want to thank you for coming before us, and I enjoyed talking with you.
Chairman,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Members of the Charter Commission, appreciate the opportunity to come share some 13 years of experience on the legislative branch of our government.
Jerry, can't hear you.
Can't hear me? May I do one thing before I get
you go right ahead, Jerry. Hey, if I'd have known that, we might have not let you do that. No, we're on television, so we got to watch.
I've seen Ms. Suzanne in quite a while.
Right. No harm.
So far as opening comments, Milton, I don't have opening comments. I have to apologize to you. The chairman called me late last week, invited me to come and speak before you with the experience I've had on 13 years. I gladly accept it. I told him that I would do a little bit of research and a little bit of homework. I got to apologize. I failed to do so. I got consumed with the Olympics.
Oh.
So I did review the charter. I reviewed some of the recommendation that came out of the 2002 Charter Commission. Really and truly, I would like to open it up to you as far as questions and answers. That's how best I operate, questions and answers. Or I can highlight on some of the things that was hit on with the previous speaker, Mr. Hughes.
Jerry, I'm going to let you, if you feel more comfortable with taking questions from the commission members, then we'll address Ms. Terry to start, and then the process will more than likely touch on
And
a lot
if I
was
come
said.
up with something that I think we need to
Please do.
share with
Please do.
all right.
Ms. Terry?
Mr. Savoy, thank you. Had you been elected parish president, is there a charter issue or issues that you believe would have made your job as parish president difficult?
In the 13 years that I've served on the council, there are a few areas in the charter that would have made it easier. But its clarification is primarily number one. Like, for instance, the last section that you talked about, 604, emergency ordinance. See, I get a totally different perspective of what I read versus what Mr. Hughes is. You know, I don't have to go and ask anybody. I can act on this right here. Now, we have to have a meeting, but we can have an emergency meeting to create the ordinance, which goes into effect immediately for us to do what we have to do for the protection of life, safety, health of the public. You know, there are a couple. Let me share this with you. In the 13 years that I've served, the council never pushed to change the ordinance, the charter. There's always been someone else, some other group. So it's not that broken, ladies and gentlemen. It's really not. There's a few items that was omitted for various reasons, and there's a couple of sections that could use some cleanup on the verbiage to clarify it a little bit better. But other than that, there's not a whole lot, Ms. Terry.
I tend to agree with you, sir. What I would ask you to do then is tell me a couple of them specifically, if I may, Mr. Milton.
Yes.
One is going back to the council secretary. As a parish councilman, we're part-time. Everybody's got a job. The council members, and I'm going to try to give you an outline of what we look at. On Thursday evening, week before the meeting, we get a packet, our meeting packet. It may be this thick that we get on Thursday evening. We all work, so we don't get it until late Thursday. Hopefully we might be able to open up Thursday. Friday, parish works half a day. A lot of businesses nowadays are working half a day, so that's limiting you to make phone calls if you have to make phone calls in reference to the material that's in your packet that you have to be prepared to make decisions and vote on the next Thursday. So really you got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to really focus on what's on the agenda. That's where the council needs a secretary department. And I can tell you now, if the elected officials today, the 11 council members, were to utilize Ms. Suzanne in her office, they definitely need additional staffing right now. I try to convince the council to go that way, okay, to utilize them, because they can do a lot of the legwork. If you really want to get on top of the issue, you want to know the meat and potato of the issue, you don't have time to make the phone calls yourself. You got to throw it to them, and they can go do it, you know. And like you say, St. Charles Parish got 9 secretaries for that council. I don't know what the magic number is, but I know what hectic schedule Ms. Suzanne and her assistant has today. Okay, so that has to be beefed up, my opinion, or work toward that once as the council starts really utilizing them. Talking about who she needs to report to, or that position needs to report to. I've experienced where there was tension over the years on which way that position needed to go, the parish president or the parish council. Well, the parish council is not going to use them if they don't have trust that they're going to go out and get the material and do the legwork that's necessary. So I want to be careful on the word that I use whenever I say that they need to be a little distance from the executive branch. And they can, and still operate very good. But anyway, that's important. I think that's something that needs to be studied quite a bit. Okay.
Mr. You finished? Mr. Moore?
Same thing, Jerry. If any additional points you have of things, either good or bad, rather than me focusing on a particular part, from what you heard earlier, and again, certainly in your experiences, any particular sections that come to mind, just go ahead and comment on another one if you have another one ready.
Let me see. They talked about department heads. The charter does lack in identifying needed department heads. That could, especially today, now we're talking about them coming on with a utilities committee. Like Mr. Ronnie said, it doesn't even address the public works and a couple other. That does need to be cleaned up. Okay. The charter as a whole, the powers of the balance of powers is pretty good. Is pretty much there. So far as the veto, y'all talked a lot about the veto and the time frame and all that. Personally, I think it's best if we keep it as short a period as we can to get the issue out on the table. You don't have time to research it and do your homework, vote on it. If the parish president elects to veto it, you already should know what the content is. Unless new information comes about, I'm not going to change my mind. So let's go ahead and get that issue dealt with, put it behind us, move on to the next one. Don't drag it out no longer than we have to, you know.
Jerry, as far as the you were talking about department heads, did I understand correctly? That maybe the charter should spell out or specify more who the department heads are that serve under the parish president, and also along with that, your thoughts on the process about whether they should serve directly to pleasure of the parish president or the executive side, or should the legislative side maybe be able to come in and reinstate a person that was removed by the executive side?
Let me give you some history. In the 13 years that I've served on council, there has been some employees that's been released. Only one instance that the council brought back fired employees. In executive session, our legal attorney recommended strongly that we bring those employees back. And I think it was a unanimous decision on the council. So is that broken, the system that we got now? No, I don't think it is. Because the council definitely has abused it over 13 years that I served. You know, and the workers need some protection. You know, like Ronnie says, there is that appeals board, but that appeals board could be just as political as the council. You know, so it has. I don't find that that's broken. To tell you the truth, and history tells me it's not broken.
Thank you.
Mr. Kenner?
I have nothing.
I just wanted to make a question, maybe in reference to the one time that you, let's say, overrode the termination of an employee. That was at the recommendation of an attorney.
The parish's attorney.
Parish
the best
attorney.
interest of the parish, they recommended that we reinstate those employees.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Mr. Red?
Chair, my question is concerning the members at large. And I know you know the pros and cons, so I'm going to ask you the pros and cons from the legislative stand. We heard from the executive branch, but I'd like to hear your views on how many and how it's going to be determined, pros and cons.
Red, and you're right. I've done a lot of discussion, especially when I'd go to conferences and I had the opportunity to meet with other parishes or other counties across the country. And it varies from county to county, parish to parish. You know, what I find is, and this is something that I find that, and I think that the parish has not come together with, where both branches, and unfortunately what I've experienced is it's not the two branches not wanting to come together, it's like two fashions. We never could get a good working council with a president, or a president working with the council. I mean, unfortunately, if you go back and you watch, that's what we've had. You know, it's trust, build trust. So far as the number, like Ronnie says, and I've done my homework on this. You got parishes with as little as 5. You've got parishes as many as 17. You know, the reason why this comes about and this discussion comes up is because of the disagreement on debates that the public Ascension Parish residents have seen over the years. That's why they're saying That's why that comes up. I guarantee you, if we had a good bond between the parish council and the parish president and move things forward with little or no heated discussions, that probably wouldn't be an issue right now. But it's an issue. At first, I thought at large, why? Why would I want to run at large? Am I going to get more authority? Am I going to get more money? Is that position get more authority, more money? No, it's not. And so up front, several years ago, I was against it. You know, today, unfortunately, since the passage of the Home Rule Charter, we as government hasn't moved toward the true meaning of Home Rule Charter. We still see signs of police jury. And unfortunately, I picked up the Gonzales Weekly this past week, and I see signs of police jury mentality right there. So maybe a number, 1, 2 at large, may be able to break that up, and may be able to get us over the hump to where we're really living and operating under the Home Rule Charter. I wouldn't be opposed. I wouldn't one way or the other, Red, at this point. But talking to other people, and that's done it. There's some parishes that gone to at large, they took it back, you know. But anyway, that's a tough one, you know. And I don't think you lose. I don't think the parish loses either way, you know.
Mr. Jerry, my question would be the reduction in the parish council. How do you feel about you addressed the at-large issue, but what about the reduction of parish council members?
As a citizen, I want to know and I want to feel comfortable that if I have a problem pertaining to parish government, that I've got a representative that's going to be able to get to me. Okay? That's important. I think that's important to the citizen of Ascension Parish. You take us going from 6,000 constituents to 10, 12,000, that's tough. We experienced it before the new census came out, where, like, for instance, whenever Mr. Dudley Brown was a council member, he ended up representing 10,000 people. That was tough. That was tough answering that many people. There again, what do you want to accomplish by shrinking it? What's the objective on shrinking it? You got to answer that question first. Otherwise, leave it like it is. You know, there is no pros or cons on reducing it, other than you're going to put a heavier load on that part-time elected official if you're going to meet the needs of your constituents in your district. That's my experience.
Mr. Porsche? I stole your question. Oh, gosh. Well, we're going to pass.
Mr. Chairman, I want to talk about Section 504, the Human Resources Department. There were some recommendations made regarding compensation of employees. As I looked through the charter, compensation is mentioned numerous times. I've always been concerned for parish employees in particular. Election years are really rough for those employees, and restructuring after a new administration takes over can even be rougher. Is there any part in the Human Resources Department's Section 5-04 that you think we need to pay special attention to help protect the employees of the parish?
It has been my experience that it's unfortunately seemed like every election year the employees became a lot more stressed. Okay, I'm gonna be as quick as I can on it. I have experienced where the employees become more stressed during election year. It would be nice on their part if there was some mechanism within the charter that protected that. Okay? Does that answer your question, Ms. Neal?
I was hoping that you would know some particular place that I could refer to.
No, I'm not saying there is in the charter. You talking
Yes.
about? No, there are none.
Thank you.
Back to Ms. Terry.
Give me 1 second, if you will, Mr. Milton.
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at some notes.
While Ms. Terry is looking at her notes, Jerry, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Mr. Hughes. I want to illustrate, maybe it's not, I want to emphasize that I'm not talking about the present people in office right now or in any position right now. Do you feel that when these people either retire or replaced for whatever reason, that each department head, including the Public Works Department, Chief of Staff, Chief Administrator, whatever, or any position that's being held, should they be like a certified public accountant, civil engineer, or have a degree in that particular field? How do you feel about that?
Milton, there are certain positions throughout parish government that really you need someone that's got a certification, and that takes getting a college degree, like, for instance, a civil engineer. Do we have some employees today that can follow very close to a civil engineer with a degree? Yes, there are. But at the end of the day, when you have to put your signature on that document, you have to be certified. So there's a couple of areas there that deem you to get a certified public accountant or a certified civil service or civil engineer. So that would enhance your ability and your flexibility to move projects forward. Yeah, but there are many people out there without a degree that can get the job done just as quick, if not quicker, at times with the experience that they have under their belt versus a degree. I've seen it in industry time and time again.
Thank you, Jerry. Ms. Terry?
I'm prepared, Mr. Milton. Understanding how you feel about the employees of the parish, I want to ask you to be a little more specific for me, if you would. In Livingston, Tangipahoa, Iberville, St. Bernard, and Jefferson Parish, the language in their charter says, give or take a word or two, that department heads, keep in mind I'm referring to department heads, are appointed by the president, are ratified by the council, and serve at the pleasure of the president. They do not have recourse to go back to the council, look for reinstatement in that job. Do you think that this is a good thing, that they serve department heads at the pleasure of the president? And if so, why? If not, why not?
I believe they should have the right to follow the same protocol as any other employee in terms of presenting their case to the personnel advisory board, and if they're not satisfied with that decision, to bring it to the full council. I think they should follow. I think that every employee should have some protection somewhere or another to where they can appeal it. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Mark?
Jerry, in the current charter under 503 parish attorney, Mr. Hughes spoke to earlier, I think, as a sidebar. And here it gives the governing authority, if they believe so, the ability to create a position and a department within the parish itself to provide for, I guess, the parish having its own parish attorney. Do you believe we're at the point where that would be a case, or should it just be left in the charter like it is, that at some point if they decide the parish needs its own separate full-time parish attorney, do it? Or do you think maybe it should be addressed and put into the charter that the parish have a full-time parish attorney?
Mark, my experience in going back to the council as far as working with the Secretary's department, a lot of our questions are legal. Okay? Sometimes it took a while to get a legal opinion. We don't have that much time. We got 4 days. Today, it has to be evaluated. Tell me what I'm paying the district attorney for the assistant district attorneys that's on the payroll today. Find out if they're getting the job done for the elected officials versus going out and opening up a legal department in-house, and what that would cost me or the taxpayers. But I can tell you, I'm leaning heavier toward in-house attorney because of the growing parish, and it's just growing, and we're talking about bringing on more departments. You know, we need answers. The council needs answers pretty quick whenever they call up, because they are working on a short time frame as far as being prepared for the meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Kenner.
I've been listening to, excuse me, about having councilmen at large. I've only been here a short time, and in the short time that I've been here, the parish is growing by leaps and bounds. And you just said a few minutes ago that I don't know if they're talking about cutting back on a councilman or what, but with the influx of people, and I understand a councilman are part-time jobs. Am I right? Or
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Well, with the influx of people and the more people that they're going to have to represent, wouldn't it be logical to bring on a few more people, you know, to get around to these people?
And you're talking in reference to adding,
or even at large, or adding more councilmen. Right now, I have a difficult time, most of the time, getting in touch with my councilman. He answers and he comes, but sometimes it takes a while.
that time that you're talking about costs money. You know, as far as is it a day, is it 2 days for you personally? There's no magic number there. I mean, you got some counties or parishes go with 5, you got some with 17. Personally, what I've experienced, you get over 7,000, that's tough. That's a number that I can relate to, as far as getting to in touching, which is very important, from the lowest level of government, which is the parish council, because we're the ones on the grounds every day around our neighborhoods and our communities and knowing exactly what needs to be done. So, you know, that's my magic number, you know. And I think the Justice Department, Robert, the Justice Department at one time told us how many we needed to have, or
Justice Department only mandates that you have an equal representation of minority.
okay.
Thank
But
you.
7,000, I'm going to tell you 7,000, personally, my experience is a good number, just to hang around.
Thank you.
Red? I'm going to take Red's question that he asked Ronnie. If you had a chance right now today to make one change in the Home Rule Charter, what would that be?
One change on the Home Rule Charter. Let me give you, I'm willing to give you two.
Okay.
One that needs to be addressed is the salary for the parish president and the council. That has been a controversy every time it's come up. You need to come up with another mechanism, a third party or an independent party, to come up with the salary of the parish president. Okay? I shared my thoughts about that years ago, where it should follow the sheriffs and the school superintendents. They all three service the same amount of people in the parish, so it should be to some degree around that. The sheriff's pay is dictated by the state legislature. That's a good one to go off of. There's no controversy. You know when it's coming up, when the state legislature changes the sheriff's pay, you automatically do it. You don't have to come back to the council. It doesn't have to be politics and a fuss and fight. It's automatically done. That's an easy one to me.
That's an easy one. I think we have a gentleman on this commission that's done already emphasize that that's what he's going to try to do. So
Yeah.
you can assure that that's going to be tossed before this commission.
But that's one of the key controversies that the charter allows to happen. You can close that door very easily. So far as something else I would change, I'd go back and look at what the controversies that we've had over the years really didn't have a whole lot to pertain to the charter. It was a mutual trust and relationship and open communications that caused our controversies. That's what I've experienced. So like I said from the beginning, I don't see where there's a whole lot broken with this piece of legislation, because the original Charter Commission, they worked very hard and they've done a good job. One thing that we didn't hit on, and I'm going to hit on, is the Drainage Board. Should it fall under or should it not? Let's go back and ask ourselves, why is it not in here? The original Charter Commission had a reason. They didn't just forget it. Those 11, 12 people that was on, they didn't sit around and forget about putting that in. There was a specific reason why it wasn't put in there. Now today, 25, 26 years later, that may have changed, but it may not have. You need to find out why it wasn't in there originally. Because that is a big issue, and it's a shame that the parish had to go through what it went through in 07, 06 and 07 as far as the split. Bottom line, the major drainage now collects in excess of $7 million, if I'm not mistaken, $7 million a year. The Drainage Board at the time felt that it was time to get a major drainage director that was over major drainage, and that was it. At the time, we had our DPW director took care of major drainage, major roads, some of the planning and zoning, and every other day-to-day operation of the parish. The Drainage Board wanted their own full-time director to put all emphasis and all energies toward major drainage. And since we've done that, go look at the progress that's been made since that's happened. Very successful. So, but go back and ask why it wasn't put in that originally.
Mr. Poche?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to the number of councilmen proposal, perhaps reducing or expanding. In theory, under the councilmatic form of government, should it not be that individual would be able to call a department as opposed to having to call his councilman, as they used to have to do under the police jury system? They could call the department, express their problem, and have their problem addressed without having to have it done by their councilman, in theory.
Mr. Poche, that is correct. I can tell you what if I had a constituent call me, I would take care of the situation. I would carry that concern to DPW, write a work order. But at the same time, I would tell that constituent, look, you don't need to call me. You can call Public Works, give them the number, and they will create a work order, and it will get done. Oh, okay. It's educating the public that they don't necessarily go directly through their councilman. And that's what's heartbreaking, because here we are, 16 years later, we're still not where we need to be. But you need help. I mean, now, there are some people that feel like, hey, no. I voted for you. I want you to take care of that for me. That's where I was, okay, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I will. But if you can't get in touch with me, you can call yourself. Now, that has helped. Now, I can tell you that's worked for me. Now, I can't tell you what the rest of the council has done.
We're just talking in theory.
Yeah, but, we're not there yet. Just like we're still seeing remnants of the police jury mentality, too. See, the whole thing hasn't moved forward like I think the public thought it would.
But don't you believe it with some help, perhaps from some type of publication or public aware of these particular numbers and department entities that cover that particular problem, that give them the numbers, tell them, name a person in charge. Don't you think that would have to help?
This is what I've learned. This is what I've learned. The public just wants some information. Just give them some information. That's all they want. What's going on? We've had lack of information getting it to the public. We have.
But as an example, again, it's, well, if I have a fire at my house, I don't want to call my parish councilman. There's a department with a number that I call to
Right.
take care of that.
Right.
If the ditch is flooding because the culvert stopped up, there should be a number I can call and get that corrected without having to go through my council.
There
Councilman.
is. It's there.
That's my point.
It's there. It's just not being conveyed.
Okay. Which goes back to my original statement that if that were in fact, we were only talking in theory, factual, then the number that you referred to that was very difficult to handle, the 7,000, 8,000, would be the number of calls you would get would actually be reduced, right?
You think so?
If that
It
was-
would if parish government stopped growing. But whenever you add a utility board and you've got the drainage and you've got the planning and zoning, that's major. I mean, no, there are still, because government's still growing here, you got to help it. As a matter of fact, I would hate to see it without the work order system or the system that we got in place today on top of the growth that we've experienced and still having to deal with the planning and zoning and the flooding or the drainage and the roads and all the other major departments.
Would you agree that, and you indicated that you spoke with many people across the whole country, that in a lot of counties they would have a reduced number, we have 11. It would be a reduced number from 11 and they still function pretty well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I got one question before we move on. What would be your recommendations as a council member in relation to the number of councilmen that this parish would need and the growth of today? What would be that number you would say recommend, either reducing or adding or remain?
I'm going to go by 7,000 constituents. That 7,000 into how many residents we got in the parish.
So in other words, if the amount of residents that would increase normally, then that would increase the number of
Yeah, but
people that you cover. So you would say create more districts?
You're going to have to put a cap on it somewhere or another. But then that's where you'll have to reevaluate the whole parish as a whole as far as how you were going to represent them. I know you're talking about doing that now, but I don't see a positive. Show me a positive about reducing it. Tell me what's your objective on reducing it. Is it to stop the argument and the arguing? That's not going to happen, because the counties and parishes that's got 5, they argue. The ones that's got 17, they argue. I mean, it's just here in the Ascension Parish, we focus on Ascension Parish. You know, read the paper and read other parishes in other counties. They got their disagreements too. You know. I'm going to go back to the reason why we're talking about reducing is because of the longevity of our controversies on the council. Learn to get along. Learn how to negotiate professionally. Come up and tell the truth. Build trust. That'll stop the arguing. And you won't mind if there's 9 or 12 council members. Money-wise, tax-wise, they make $1,000 a month.
I realize that. Thank you. We pass? Pass. Back to Ms. Terry.
One question. Jerry, I think you've been quite eloquent, and one of the things you hit on at some point in your discussion created a question for me. In several parishes surrounding us, there is a mandatory charter review every so many years. This is, after all, a living document, and rather than have review boards come out of conflict or come out of someone's dissatisfaction, do you think that a I don't know exactly what each one of these little things are called, excuse me, but that a mention in our charter of a mandatory review every so many years, of course we could come up with a number of years, might be helpful.
Yes, yeah, I do think that you have to review. I mean, because like you said, it is a living document and things change. Like, for instance, going from 75,000 residents to 100,000 within a matter of 8 years. That's big. Yeah, and it may be where you need to review it earlier than what the charter calls for.
And we don't have any call at all.
Right.
We're appointed, as you pointed out, because
Right.
somebody's not happy.
Right.
It comes out of conflict.
Yeah.
So I thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Martin?
Jerry, the only other thing I'd have is, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, I know it's kind of short notice, anything that you've seen in parishes here in our state that operate under the home rule charter like we do, is there anything in somebody else's charter that maybe we do not have in ours, or is really different in your experience you've seen and said we really should have that in our charter?
Mark, I can tell you that I do remember a couple of things that other counties had, but to give you a specific right now, I can't. Right off the top of my head, I can't remember.
And
you got that? You don't have that.
If you don't mind, if at some point of those, you recall those, or you have a little time to look at it, if you don't mind, if you would maybe see that we could get those ideas from you.
I'll try to think of them.
Mr. Jerry? Oh, excuse me.
Let me finish with this.
In closing, go ahead.
It's important understanding your roles and responsibilities and where you have to go, because I think you have a deadline of April. Okay? Please I think it would be very helpful if you made contact with the council, today's council. Don't try to go through this whole charter. Try to find out where they stand on some of the key issues, because it may not be an issue to half of them. So you got to fill them in. You got to keep them abreast of what's going on. If you please, you're looking for defeat if you wait till April of next year and you deliver it to them, your findings and your recommendations. Just experience. Get a good feel for where they're at and what they think of the charter, because you know why? They're the ones that's got to put it on the ballot. Okay? So,
Mr. Jerry, let me answer that, Mr. Jerry, and I know I'm going to step on a few toes here. The beginning of this month, I personally sent out an email to each parish councilman and the parish president on August the 8th. The secretary sent out a memo to the same people and department heads. As of today, we've only received 2 back of the areas that we requested for them to look at if there was any type of wording, language, or anything pertaining to the Home Rule Charter to get back to this commission, and we could go forward with that. My next step is we have an agenda here for an outline, master outline, that we're going to present after you, and that we'll take it from there as such. But yes, I have contacted each parish councilman and having them for them to give us ideas in areas of the Home Rule Charter that we need to look at and address from their standpoint as officials today. And I'm hoping, I've kind of got on them at the meeting last week, and I hope by the end of this coming week, for our next meeting, that we will receive those comments back so that we can invite them and be prepared to invite them here to discuss those issues.
Okay, well, I thought that is an important piece of information that I'm giving you, sharing with you, because being there, waiting for the last minute. As long as you try, that's all
Yes,
you
sir.
can
Right,
do.
yeah. I'm going to ask you, like I asked Mr. Hughes, would you take and your time between now and the next couple of meetings, jot down so that we make sure that we do not forget the areas in which you felt like, as an official, for the number of years that you were an elected official, would you please just jot down some little notes and get them back to us and Ms. Suzanne so that we can make sure that we cover the areas that you feel as an official those many years that you're concerned in the charter, so that when we do sit down as a group and put together the information, that we don't overlook anything.
I certainly will. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity to come before y'all. If y'all got any questions, please don't hesitate to give me a call. I'd be more than happy to spend some time with you.
Jerry, I enjoyed talking with you the other night, and I, on behalf of this council, I thank you for coming before us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hope this is a success in y'all's journey.
Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Milton,
Ms. Terry.
would you please acknowledge the two individuals who did respond so that the public is aware of who did make an effort to get back with us, please?
Yes, I will be happy to. And it may be the rest of them are getting their information back to me. I'm not doing anything to put doubt in the public's mind about their efficiency. Mr. Kent Shakeschneider and the parish president, they sent back some answers to the questions that I asked, and I was assured by each one of the other council members that they would be getting their answers back. I think they had meetings they had to go to and all, so I'm gonna cut them a little slack until next meeting.
I'm going to dump salt in their food in the next meeting.
That would be a good idea. Maybe some of your other commission members can sort of push them a little bit, as it is a part-time job, so maybe y'all can kind of call them and push them a little bit to get their questionnaire back to us. Okay. Our next agenda item is number 5, and it's going to be the presentation of a master plan. At this time, we're going to ask if there's any public comment on this issue, and I think we do. And Ms. Catherine, let's come.
Thank you, Chairman Kluwak.
Yes, ma'am.
I did not have access to the master plan, whatever you have in your hands, but I'm going to make some comments that'll kind of tie in with what you've just heard from past President Hughes and Councilman Savoy. One of you asked a very important question at a recent meeting, and this is the question that you asked: why are we here? I think that's an important question to answer. I think you've got some of the answer to that tonight. A little history will give some perspective. In the first 2 years under the charter, the political seas were very calm. President Martinez stepped out of the council position and assumed the administrative role. Previous political alliances were in place, and the charter was in its infancy. And the following 4 years saw very little change. When Harold Marchand took the helm in 2000, the administration changed, but the council remained. This change brought new personality and also friction into the parish government. Political alliances were strained, and differences were evident, which led to 13 vetoes by the parish president. These vetoes, part of the checks and balances in our form of government, were highlighted in the media and caused the people to think that something was wrong with the charter. This is when the chambers met to discuss possible changes, and that's what you were previously given. The face of local government changes when we elect new officials. New alliances are made. The balance of power often changes, as does the agenda of a new administration. Politics in Ascension Parish amount to 3 words: count the votes. At least 6 are needed for most items, but some require a 2/3 majority, like putting a tax on the ballot. Why are you here? First, I believe that many people are not involved with their local government and do not understand the processes that are outlined in the charter. Past acrimony has been blamed on the charter. Healthy debate is a necessary part of good government. Divisions and differences are not caused by the charter, but by the personalities and agendas of the people who are elected. The slowness of the process is deliberate, so that changes will be carefully made. The process allows the voting public time to be informed and take part in the debate if they so choose. Second, President Marchand promised in his recent campaign he would establish a commission to review the charter. Your existence fulfills his campaign promise. The fact that this commission was created does not assume that the charter needs changing. That is for you to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, I have asked Mr. Red Loop here to present the, well, I might say, new master plan, because we had one before and we kind of got maybe misdirected. So we put together another one, and we're presenting it to the board tonight. We'd like for you to review it, because then we'd like to come back in the next meeting, propose it as a motion to adopt it. And once we adopt it, it explains what we have to do from now until April 1st. Red, would you take it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fellow commissioners, I would like to review this thing, but due to the late hours, I'd like to do it as quickly as we can and save you questions for next time. We changed it to outline procedures to establish, which is the report of recommendation, which the ordinance called for. And I broke it down into 3 sections, 3 phases. And judging by the phases, I wanted to last for them to last 2 months. 2 months on phase 1, 2 months on phase 2, and 2 months on phase 3. That would put us finished by end of February. And that way we could give the council a final document in the March meeting. If you look at it, phase 1 is a home rule charter review. And it's self-explanatory. Maybe we can add or delete some of the stuff in it and make it easier for us to go by and get it. Because I'm under the impression that's not that much we're going to change on the home rule charter. I don't think if we come up with 50 changes, they're gonna just it's ill and know it. So I would say if we keep it between the 5 and the 7 changes, I think we'd have a lot better chances of getting our project accomplished. Phase 2, elected officials and ex-officials of the parish government interview and input, which we started already, and I think in 2 months we could cover that. And phase 3, implementation of the amendments of the report of the commission of the recommendation, I think we can do that within 2 months, because we'll have all the information for phase 1 and phase 2 compiled into phase 3, and we'll have all our questions so we can review it and vote on it. Please, if you would, look at it. It's not in stone, so just look at it over the next couple of days. In the next meeting, come back with your questions and changes so we can proceed with it.
Red.
Thank you very much.
Red, let me ask you a question. In order to prepare and have this commission set forth, are we going to actually start discussing the home rule charter itself? Or are we going to, in other words, if we wait until the next meeting to adopt this, then I guess my question is, going into the home rule charter itself on articles and sections, are we going to start doing that next meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to see us review it, and I would like to have us take like articles 1, 2, and 3 of the home rule charter and be ready to debate that and see if there's any changes to it at the next meeting. But so far as saying yes or no, I would think we could do that in the first part of changing the outline, add or subtract the outline, and we can get a finished product the first part of the meeting. And then we can go into the reviewing of it and get your recommendations.
I'll get it. Let's see, there was one other thing. Okay, it was brought to my attention that our next scheduled meeting is, Mrs. Angel, next week, I think you told me, which would be the 3rd, September the 3rd, which is next week. Is everybody in compliance with that? Now, we do go ahead and meet next Wednesday, which would be September the 3rd, which would be next week.
Yeah.
I have set a schedule. We meet on the 1st and 3rd Wednesday of each month, and if we're going to fit the schedule of master plans, we need to meet and try to discuss, and maybe we can pick up some time in this, because we're going to be getting down into the December months, and we may not want to meet twice a month, but we'll have to if we need to. But
Do you have a date for the other one in September?
Yes, ma'am. It'll be September the 3rd and September the 7th. I mean, excuse me, I'm sorry, the 17th. I apologize. I'm very sorry. I'm looking at, I covered the 1 and I'm saying the 7, man. October the 1st and October the 15th. November the 5th and the 19th. December the 3rd and the 17th. January the 7th and the 21st. February the 4th and the 18th. March the 4th and the 18th. And then April 1st, which would be the first council meeting that we meet. We turn the report in on the first meeting of April to the council. And I think Mr. Red has scheduled it up, so we got it scheduled. So that would be the schedule.
Now, from the council members, we're going to hopefully receive the material that you asked for, and we'll use that for their recommendations or for their concerns.
Yes. In other words, tonight was just, the two guests that was here tonight was to get a feel, to let everybody get both from the administration side and the legislature side. Now we'll start attacking. We have a good feel of the areas. We can now start attacking the charter itself. And once we go through the charter, then we can bring some more people in. We will bring more people in. And question and answer session type thing. And like Mr. Simmons said with the master plan, hopefully at the end of the review of the charter and the review of the and interviews, that we can go ahead and start making motions to change or amend the home rule charter for recommendations to the parish council. And that is the plan. Hopefully we can maybe even speed that up a little bit if we have.
Mr. Savoy indicated that if we wait to present it to the council in April, naturally they may not be gung-ho about accepting it. So how are we going to be sure that we are kind of
okay,
abreast of what's going on?
Okay, there was an ordinance made and a commission created that we come up with recommendations to the council on the home rule charter, and it was set that April the 1st would be the deadline. And we had our first meeting was parish president and the chairman of the council, and they both assured us that they would take it before the full council. They both assured us that it would go before the full council. Now they have the rights to. They have to bring it before the people. So in other words, according to the ordinance, they're gonna look at each recommendation, and they can either accept or deny the changes. And have any questions before we adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Second.